Hi there, I'm Bob Waite, Creatability's User Experience Specialist. Today I'm going to be demonstrating how the application and web portal for Employment Pathfinder works, both for the job seeker and the job coach. Employment Pathfinder for job seeker can be completed in a couple of different ways. One of them is a web portal where they can answer assessment questions and view jobs they might be interested in a web-compatible format. And the other is through a smart application for tablet devices and phones that's available in the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. We'll be going over how both of those work today. Once the job coach is issued credentials to access the Employment Pathfinder website, they can start right away. One of the first things they can do is either creating a shareable link so that their job seeker can complete the Employment Pathfinder assessments online via a browser, or they can create a user ID that can be plugged into the Employment Pathfinder application. The difference between those two is that the web portal is a more traditionally designed assessment interface where they're presented with all of the questions on the screen and they can answer individually. Whereas the application from the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store has a more curated interface that is more accessible for people that might have difficulty reading or maybe overwhelmed with having too many buttons or options on the screens at once. It's a bit more of a curated user interface that's more simplified and easier to understand. So now that I've connected my job seeker with either that shareable link or the user ID so that they can begin the Employment Pathfinder journey, we're going to start our own for this job seeker. We're going to answer some onboarding assessments about their work history, what we perceive their interviewing skills to be, their comfort level with technology, and also what is their readiness level to take on a role. Once you've connected your job seeker with either the Employment Pathfinder app with their user ID that you've created, or you've created a shareable link and given them access so that they can complete the Employment Pathfinder journey through the browser, you can also instruct them to answer the job interest questions. So these are a series of 15 and growing job interest screeners. They can go through each of these vocations and they can read a little bit about what is entailed in that job, what some of the basic duties are, but they can also view a few sample videos of people working those roles. Something to note is that the job seeker is going to be the only person that's answering the job interests section. For obvious reasons, it's their interests. But once those interests have been filled out, at the bottom of the screen, for every role or position that they've expressed interest in, there's now a readiness screener for those particular interests that they have. So if your job seeker has expressed interest in house cleaning and automotive jobs, that's what they're going to be answering questions about. So at your job seekers and your leisure, you can both complete those job interest skill levels assessments. And at that point, you're ready to generate a report so we can do a gap analysis and see what's going on. So to generate a report for Employment Pathfinder, after you and your job seeker have completed the onboarding assessments, your job seeker has done their job interests assessments, and you've both taken the job skills assessments, you're ready just to hit the download job report button at the top of the page. Now, another thing to note is that you can get out of Employment Pathfinder what you put in. It's not a set requirement for you to answer all of the onboarding assessments. You're not required to answer all of the skills assessments. But the more that you do answer and the more that you ensure the integrity of the answers of your job seeker, the more detail and the better information you're going to be able to pull out of the report that's generated. So now we're looking at a Employment Pathfinder job report that we generated from answering the Employment Pathfinder journey along with our job seeker. So there's a couple of things to note on the first page here. And that is the donut charts on the first table here. It says onboarding. These are how we rated the job seeker in those onboarding areas, the first section on the Employment Pathfinder journey, and how they rated themselves. So we can quickly orient and see, where are those gaps in how they are perceiving their skill level or their readiness or work history or interviewing skills versus how we're perceiving them. And it's the same thing for the skills assessment. If we go down below the job interests, we can see more of these donut charts. So what do these quantifications mean, and what do those gaps mean? If we scroll down to the next page, we'll see sort of a recap on the sections that the report's detailing for each category, the skills assessments that we took for the job interests that were flagged by the job seeker. And then when we scroll beneath that, we finally get to see what are the recommended accommodations and what are some of the details on how both the job seeker and the job coach have answered. Now, the recommended accommodations are steps that can be taken to remediate a certain gap area that's been identified in the report. So just for example, the first one here, a gap area identified is arriving on time, and the recommended accommodations would be a timer or a scheduled prompt or a checklist of some kind. So it might be worth looking into a task analysis solution for this particular case. So there's recommended accommodations for each of the gap areas that are identified in the assessments that you can leverage for your job seeker so that they have a better chance of getting into the role that they want. The Employment Pathfinder report does this for each of the areas that we assessed for. So all of those onboarding questions that were answered and all of the job skills assessments that were answered, there's very fine data on what the skills gaps are and what the recommended accommodations can be. And depending on how you want to leverage the report, you can do it very quickly and think in quantification, or you can dive in and read the why behind everything and really qualify the decisions that you're making to help that person get into their next job. And that concludes our demo for Employment Pathfinder. I'd like to thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.